was a year ago that I sat in the sauna at Ironworks in Berkeley and announced to a group of naked strangers that I was going to walk across the country from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail. I had recently gone through a hard breakup and was feeling unhappy at work, and I needed a change. I needed to stir things up. So I quit my job, I put my stuff in storage, and I packed a small backpack full of the essentials: water filter, stove, sleeping bag, sleeping pad, tent, and a little bit of whiskey. And I caught a flight to San Diego. There I was picked up at the airport by some trail angels, an older couple who was retired who had hiked the PCT a few years ago and now devote their lives to helping other hikers. And they let me stay at their house for the night in their backyard, and in the morning we woke up around 4:30 a.m. and they drove me to the small town of Campo, California on the Mexican border and dropped me off at sunrise. Their car pulled away, and before me there was a trail leading 2,650 miles to Canada, and I took my first steps. The first 750 miles of the trail are the desert, the Mojave, and it has its own beauty and its own unique hazards. Each step I had to watch out for rattlesnakes. In the morning I had to shake out my shoes, make sure there were no scorpions. There was poison oak and poodle dog bush. Who's heard of that? But I guess it gives you a horrible rash. And worst of all, there was the heat and the dry desert. Some sections 20, 30, 40 miles without water, where I had to carry 7, 10, 12 liters of water at a time, 20 pounds, 24 pounds, often hiking at night to avoid the heat of the day. There were other hikers out there. About 2,000 people start the trail each year, maybe a little bit more this year after Reese Witherspoon did it. They were out there. I would run into other people, and we all had our trail names. Mine was Disco because of the pink sequin cape that I had draped hanging over the back of my backpack. One guy I met, whose name was Mimbo Jimbo, after a Danish children's book, ended up becoming a great friend of mine. He himself was Danish, and a lot of the hikers on the trail were international, a great group of people. But often I was alone, and as I made my way through the desert to the high Sierra of Central California, I encountered new challenges. There I found snow and ice, and on June 1st I hiked and summited Mount Whitney with an ice axe and crampons, and for the next month going north I was in thick, deep snowpack. In the afternoons, as the snow would melt, I would step by step fall up to my knees into the snow. They call it post-holing, and that made for slow miles. There was intense beauty I can't describe. Amazing moments where you feel part of the planet, the universe, infinity, and you feel so alive. On day 72 of my trek, I reached the halfway point in Lassen National Forest in Northern California. And there I was alone at this point in the trip. And after 27 and a half miles that day, I got to Stover Spring, where I was planning on camping for the night. At that point, 28-mile days were pretty common for me. I even did some 30, 35, 38 miles was my longest day. And on this particular day, I got to that water source, and I saw two other hikers with a fire nearby. And I wasn't really in the mood to socialize that night, and I was enjoying the peace of being alone. So I filled up on water and decided to do another half mile to the top of a wooded ridge where I thought on my map would be a good place to spend the night. Rounded out an even 28 miles for the day. So I got my water and I hiked on, and when I got to the top of that ridge, I found there wasn't a campsite there really anywhere. I kept walking and finally found a place to set up my tent between some brush and a little opening. And the sun was setting, and I started making my mac and cheese, Annie's, a favorite meal on the trail. And I heard a noise in the woods nearby, clearly a large mammal. I thought a deer or maybe a bear. And so I banged my spoon on my pot, as I'd done many times before. By this point, I had gotten rid of my bear canister, which was required in the Sierra of in Yosemite, Sequoia, and Kings Canyon. That section, for about 350 miles, I lugged this 5-pound canister with all my food in it. But by this time, it was no longer required, so I got rid of it. And my food was just in a little canvas bag. So, hearing this animal, I kind of tied my food up on a branch nearby. I got into my tent and I started writing in my journal. Not too worried. I had seen plenty of bears and deer and marmots and things like that. And usually they just get scared and run away. But in this case, the noises persisted. And I heard this large animal circling my tent for the next 3 hours. And I made a lot of noise. I was yelling, I was clapping. I even played a Tom Petty song on full blast. But this thing would not back down. And at that point, I was getting freaked out. It was feeling aggressive, and it even got to the point where I shined my light out and I saw the eyes just 30, 40 feet away, but I couldn't make out what animal it was. But I was pretty sure at this point it was a bear, black bear. And not known to be aggressive, but this behavior started really freaking me out. I started hearing footsteps running toward my tent and skidding to a stop, like it was like a bull trying to charge me. And I'd never heard of a bear or any animal acting this way to someone in the wild. And there I was, alone in my tent, thinking about my options. Stay in the relative comfort of my nylon tent, get out and try to make a fire, or continue to try to scare it away, or hike back to the spring where I remembered I'd seen these two campers. And I decided I'd be most comfortable around other people. So my headlamp unfortunately was fading at that time. And so I put it on facing backwards, and I had my phone and put the phone light, which was brighter, facing forward. So I was kind of all lit up. I got out of my tent, made a bunch of noise, and quickly packed up my bag and got onto the trail. That was the longest half mile of my entire hike back to where those guys were. I rolled in about 2 a.m. and set my tent up next to them, trying not to freak them out or that there was an intruder in the middle of the night. And right as I had set up my tent, I heard something running through the forest and sort of a high-pitched squeal, a sort of scream that I had never heard before. And I look over and shine my light, and there's an enormous mountain lion, almost as big as me, lean and muscular and fierce. And it's 20 feet away. And at that point, I say, guys, I'm sorry to wake you, but good to see you. And I hear them stirring, and these guys get out of their tent, and it turns out they don't speak any English. It turns out they're from Taiwan, and I don't speak Taiwanese. So there I am, miming in the middle of the night, this sort of charade, trying to let them know what's going on. But they shine their light, and they get it. They see and they quickly start talking to each other. And though I couldn't understand them, and they couldn't understand me, I had never felt so comforted to be around other humans. and we made a fire. And for the next 2-3 hours, we watched as this cat circled our campground. And we tried scaring it away, but she was determined. Finally, the sun started rising, and after a while, we didn't see her there anymore. And I got about an hour of sleep before waking up and wanting to get out of there. So I pack up my things, and these guys pack up theirs, and they're heading south, and I'm heading north. And we give big hugs, and we exchange Instagram handles. And I hike, and after a few miles, actually find a day hiker who's out there who lives in a small town of Chester nearby. And I tell the story to. And she says she's heard of there are many cats in the area, and every year their livestock are killed, but she's never heard of a human being attacked. And that's very strange behavior for a mountain lion, who are known to be so elusive, that she was so aggressive. And she thought that this cat, I must have happened to set up camp right near her den, and that it was a mother, and she had kids there, and she just was trying to get me out of there, and hence the aggressive behavior. So I guess that makes sense. She was just trying to be a good mom. Happy International Women's Day.